What if the voice inside your head telling you that you are a selfish, uncaring person isn't actually your own conscience, but a highly calculated program planted there by someone else? The most terrifying reality of human behavior is that your greatest psychological vulnerabilities are not your flaws, but your natural empathy and your desire to be a good person. When a skilled manipulator wants to dismantle your autonomy, they don't use physical force or open hostility. They use weaponized guilt, manufactured tears, and calculated chaos to make you slowly abandon your own boundaries until you completely question your own reality. By breaking down the complex educational psychology behind these covert emotional tactics, you undergo a profound human transformation, shifting from a vulnerable target to an exceptionally aware behavioral strategist. This masterclass in psychological analysis is designed to elevate your awareness, providing the ultimate mental improvement, self-protection, and self-growth necessary to reclaim complete sovereignty over your own mind. The foundation of high-leverage behavioral control often begins with the calculated tactic of making you feel selfish. In educational psychology, this leverages a person's pro-social drive, the deeply ingrained human desire to contribute positively to others and maintain a reputation as a compassionate individual. When a manipulator wants to override your boundaries, they will frame your basic self-care, your personal time, or your financial limits as an act of cruel egoism. To apply this deeply to analyze human behavior, an individual shifts the entire focus of a boundary from a healthy limit to a personal attack. For instance, if you refuse to lend money or sacrifice your weekend, the response isn't an acceptance of your choice, but a narrative that says, you only ever care about yourself. This triggers an immediate, uncomfortable wave of cognitive dissonance within your brain. To escape the painful label of being selfish, the target will readily abandon their original boundary and concede to the demand, effectively letting the manipulator dictate their priorities. When intellectual guilt isn't enough to force compliance, a manipulator will seamlessly transition into strategic crying. Tears are a powerful evolutionary signaling mechanism designed to elicit immediate empathy, protection, and a reduction of aggression from peers. However, in behavioral analysis, tears can be deliberately manufactured as an emotional shield to entirely bypass accountability. To utilize this dynamic on a profound level, you introduce intense crying the exact moment you are caught in a lie or confronted with undeniable evidence of wrongdoing. By transforming your guilt into a display of overwhelming emotional devastation, you instantly shock the target's nervous system. The target stops focusing on your transgression and immediately shifts into a caretaking role. They become so deeply desperate to stop your pain that they will apologize for bringing the issue up in the first place, leaving you completely immune to consequences while they shoulder the emotional burden. This emotional reset sets the perfect stage for the introduction of a false compromise. Human beings are psychologically conditioned to value fairness and reciprocity, meaning we are naturally inclined to meet someone halfway during a disagreement. A false compromise exploits this bias by intentionally starting with an incredibly extreme, absurd demand that the manipulator has absolutely no intention of keeping. In practice, this means setting the baseline so high that when you negotiate down to your actual covert goal, it looks like a massive concession on your part. To execute this deeply, you demand an unreasonable sacrifice from the target. When they naturally push back, you act deeply hurt but offer to settle for what you actually wanted from the very beginning. Because the target's brain perceives this as a generous act of compromise, they feel an intense psychological pressure to agree, completely unaware that they have just handed over exactly what you planned to take all along. The compounding effect of these continuous shifts rapidly accelerates into creating emotional exhaustion. The human brain requires an immense amount of glucose and mental energy to maintain critical thinking, logic, and self-protection. When an individual is subjected to a non-stop cycle of arguments, shifting goalposts, manufactured crises, and intense emotional swings, their cognitive defenses become completely depleted. To implement this dynamic systematically, you never allow a disagreement to reach a peaceful resolution. You drag out simple discussions for hours, bring up past unrelated grievances at 2 a.m., and flip between hot and cold behaviors without warning. This continuous state of hypervigilance completely drains the target's willpower. Eventually, the target enters a state of psychological burnout where their critical faculties shut down, and they will agree to any condition, sign any contract, or accept any blame just to obtain a few moments of quiet and mental peace. This systematic depletion of energy prepares the target for the final, most devastating layer of behavioral manipulation, making you question reality. In advanced psychological analysis, this is the deliberate distortion of a person's cognitive processing, where their memory, perception, and sanity are continuously challenged until they no longer trust their own senses. When a manipulator confidently denies events that occurred, alters details of a past conversation, or insists that your emotional reactions are proof of an unstable mind, they trigger an acute psychological crisis. To apply this on a deep level, you must contradict the target's reality with absolute calmness and unwavering certainty, using phrases like, "That never happened," or "You're completely imagining things because you're stressed." Over time, the target stops relying on their own internal compass and completely relies on your version of history, handing you absolute authority over what is true and what is false. Deconstructing these highly sophisticated dark psychology tactics is the absolute turning point for your personal self-growth, permanent awareness, and robust self-protection. True human transformation happens the moment you realize that weaponized guilt, strategic tears, and artificial compromises are simply manufactured illusions engineered to exploit your empathy and exhaust your intellect. When you learn to remain emotionally detached in the face of manufactured exhaustion, when you trust your own memory without requiring external validation, and when you recognize that prioritizing your own mental health is not an act of selfishness, you completely shatter the manipulator's framework. By elevating your awareness through the lens of educational behavioral psychology, you transform your mind into an absolute fortress, ensuring that you are never a captive audience to someone else's psychological theater, but always the absolute master of your own reality. The moment you realize that their emotional chaos is just a calculated smokescreen to hide their lack of accountability is the exact moment you reclaim the power to simply walk away.